Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're breaking down some of the most powerful techniques from my book, Out of the Cage, A Complete Guide to Beating a Mixed Martial Artist on the Street. Now, with so many people studying mixed martial arts these days, there's a good chance that you could actually face off against one in a real confrontation. But a street fight is a completely different animal, and you don't need to actually go inside of a cage to learn how to handle the situation. So in this video, I'll give you a sneak peek at some of the strategies from this book and help you turn the tables on even the most skilled MMA fighter. Let's check it out. So here's the front cover of the book. This is the spine, and this is the back of the book. Now, this is actually slightly larger than most of my other publications. It just happened to come out that way. It's approximately 194 pages. It's available in Kindle and paperback format. It's available on Amazon, and I will put a link in the description down below if you'd like to check it out. So let's take a look inside the book. We've got 7 chapters, a glossary of terms, and about yours truly. And I always have an introduction into my contemporary fighting arts system. Now, chapter 1 is Mixed Martial Arts Explored. What this chapter is designed to do is to give you a really good foundation on how mixed martial arts came about in the United States, why they became popular. I even talk a little bit about Bruce Lee and how he actually was the father of MMA. People don't realize that, but he was the one who really emphasized the concept and the importance of stylistic integration for any system to be effective. And there's some discussion about Bruce's influence. And then I talk about the different types of styles that are integrated into MMA, and of course the different types of workouts. And of course I talk about some of the gear that they use. I just wanted to give the reader a really good foundation about what a potential adversary who has MMA training, what type of background he might have. And most importantly, towards the end of the chapter, I talk about techniques that are prohibited in MMA matches. So these are techniques that often are used in reality-based self-defense, and this is what gives you a tremendous advantage in a street fighting situation. Now in chapter 2, we have MMA and the street. So this chapter is devoted to explaining the differences between mixed martial arts training and reality-based self-defense training. And it actually describes in depth the limitations of MMA training for RBSD. And I also included here a very controversial tongue-in-cheek article that I wrote. It's Sammy Franco's Open Challenge, and you can actually read this challenge, and it's amazing how many people fail to understand that what I was trying to actually illustrate in this challenge. So you can read through it and see the sarcasm in it, but the objective of this article, this very brief article that I had written, was to expose the actual inherent limitations of MMA training for reality-based self-defense. So that's included actually in this chapter. Chapter 3 is the primary MMA disciplines. So what I've done in this chapter is talk about the various disciplines that are integrated in MMA. Now that you have boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu. There are others that are integrated into it, but these are just the foundational disciplines that are integrated into it. And then I give a breakdown of the different tools within each discipline that are often used. So for boxing, we have the jab, the straight right, left and right hooks, uppercuts, shovel hooks, overhands. Then we have kickboxing. Again, I give some of the breakdown of the different techniques that you could expect for somebody who studies MMA. And of course, wrestling, we have judo and jiu-jitsu. So in chapter 4, I talk about understanding MMA tactics. So what I really bring in this chapter is talking about how there's the grappling concept. And this is really what gives the MMA fighter a tactical advantage over most people in the streets, is their ability to grapple and ground fight. And I give a breakdown of some of the different types of grappling styles that are integrated into MMA. And then I talk about why grappling is so advantageous to an MMA fighter. because A, it's an enigma to the layperson. The range is actually inevitable. If they want to close that distance on you, unless you can really land a precision strike, they're going to close that distance on you. And then I talk about how grappling range is relatively easy to maintain as opposed to other ranges such as punching and kicking ranges of unarmed combat. Then I delve into the different types of probable methods of attack that an MMA fighter may execute in a fight. So this is giving you all the different types of framework that you could face against an MMA fighter. And I talk about the different attributes that an MMA fighter will possess if he's trained well, of course. But then in this chapter, I talk about the chink in the MMA armor. I'm talking about multiple attackers, positional asphyxia, edge weapon attacks, time consumption. And this really gives you an overall idea that MMA fighters are inherently vulnerable when it comes to street fighting situations. Then I talk about dispelling some of the MMA myths that exist. Some people think that MMA fighters are not strategic fighters. That's absolutely incorrect. In fact, they're incredibly intelligent. And some people feel that smaller MMA fighters can't grapple or ground fight. That's a mistake. And it goes through many of the other different types of myths that exist. And this is important for you to understand, because if you have some erroneous preconceived notion about MMA fighters, it can cost you a fight. So this is important to go over this in this chapter. Now in chapter 5, we're talking about fighting inside the clinch. Now this is very important because, as I mentioned in the previous chapters, your biggest concern when fighting an MMA fighter is the fact that he's a skilled grappler, which means he can grab, clinch, tackle, throw you, wrestle you to the ground. And most people are unprepared for this. So in this chapter, I talk about the different ranges of combat, and then I delve into the importance of understanding about the clinch. And I talk about defensive clinching. I talk how to clinch with an MMA fighter in a reality-based self-defense situation, which is different than the sport-oriented clinch techniques that they teach in various MMA styles. So I go into it in depth, and I talk about different techniques that we consider foul techniques that MMA fighters cannot use, and how we can use that to gain the advantage over them in a reality-based self-defense situation. And incidentally, I also talk about how the Widowmaker program and also my Savage Street Fighting program, which are extreme combat methodologies, which should only be used in life and death situations, how they can also be integrated into your fighting methodology when faced with a MMA fighter who is using deadly force. So chapter 6 is all about countering the takedown, because the takedown is a staple technique found in just about every MMA fighter's arsenal. So if you're able to counter the takedown, you don't have to go down on the ground and get involved in a ground fight. This is especially critical if you're faced with more than one attacker. As I've said in so many of my other videos, you never want to go down to the ground in a multiple attacker situation. So again, MMA fighters, you could be faced off with 2 or 3 of them. You never know what's out there. So it's important to learn how to counter the takedown and not go down to the ground. Now, I've also, and throughout my years of teaching, I've also concluded that regardless of who is fighting, your adversary will generally perform a takedown for one of 3 reasons. One is a strategic attack. The second one is a desperation move, or the third and final one is practitioner error. And this chapter talks all about what it is, how it takes place, and the frequency in which it most likely will occur. And I talk about the takedown rule of thumb. I talk about the different types of body tackles, be it the upper body tackle, the mid body tackle, and the lower body tackle. And then I talk about the specific counters to those tackles. And I have different drills too that helps make you more cognizant of it, how to see the telegraphing and prevent it from actually happening. So I have a breakdown of 5 of CFA's takedown defenses, which are unique to my system of combat. And it's all explained here in the chapter, from range manipulation to height change to level of entry, stiff arm jamming techniques, which is something that I designed many years ago from our de-escalation stance, which is incredibly effective. And this is not just also for MMA fighters, it's also for just the really oversized opponent who just wants to bum rush you and take you down. So this is particularly effective too against the unseasoned street fighter. We have flow drills. And then I talk about deadly force situations and integrating the webbing technique against the takedown, which is again part of the Widowmaker program. You're frequently gonna hear about the Widowmaker program or feral fighting or savage street fighting, because those are extreme force self-defense techniques that do have their place in reality-based self-defense. We talk about sprawling and how to use that against the tackle. So the final chapter is chapter 7, when it goes to the ground, and I talk about the different ground fighting positions. So it's important to note that despite your best efforts to stop the MMA fighter in a clinch situation, or if he tries to perform a tackle and you try to negate it, there's always the possibility that he may get you down to the ground, which of course in a reality-based self-defense situation, we really never want to go to the ground for so many different reasons. But again, you must be prepared for this possible situation. And if you're not, you're really, really vulnerable. So this talks about the ground fighting positions. I talk about the mount position. We talk about the guard. We talk about the advantages, the disadvantages. And the objective is, even if the term guard or mount is something that's foreign to you, it's important to read this chapter so you gain the knowledge, because with knowledge comes confidence. And it gives you a better position to deploy the techniques that you need to use in a self-defense situation. Because again, always remember, the more you know in a fight, the less you will fear. Then we talk about some basic escape techniques. I'll give several different options, from escaping from the mount, escaping from the guard position, the perpendicular mount. Very important stuff here, guys. You have to know how to ground fight, especially if you're going to face a MMA fighter. We don't want to go to the ground. I'm going to always say that, but if you do, you'll have the knowledge, skills, and attitude to help you prevail in the fight. And I talk a little bit about the submission techniques, different hand grips, talk about choking techniques. People don't realize that applying a rear naked choke, as you see here, that's a deadly force situation. And people don't realize when you cut off oxygenated blood to the brain, it's a dangerous situation. It's definitely deadly force. Talk about body weapon tools, extreme fighting techniques such as biting, crushing, gouging. And I give lots of other ground fighting tips. Talk about using the environment to your advantage. Again, we're talking about reality-based self-defense. We're not talking about competition or sport. They do have their place in the entertainment industry, but when it comes to life and death situations, reality-based self-defense is what you need to train for. And then I talk about, of course, the limitations of ground fighting and the importance of training regularly. Some references to some of my videos that discuss ground fighting techniques for reality-based self-defense. And finally, at the end of the book, we have a glossary of terms that are unique to the contemporary fighting art system. And see here, I believe there's a little bit about me in the back here, about yours truly. So this is the book, Out of the Cage, A Complete Guide to Beating a Mixed Martial Artist on the Street. It is available on Amazon. I will put a link in the description down below. And I'd love to hear your feedback on this book. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.